Okay, I think we're live. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those new here, my name is Nikki and this is the fifth, I believe now, video in my language learning series. And today we're just going to have a bit of a quick chat about what I've been doing for language learning during 2021 and what my plans are as we go into 2022. And at the end, I'll just talk a bit about the next few videos and what's coming as well. So, first of all, let me just get rid of this banner. Okay. Language learning, as I've talked a bit about in my previous videos, I've been learning foreign languages since high school, off and on, different ones at different times. And the most recent two I started were Japanese and Korean. Japanese I've been going for probably coming up for definitely 2 years. It might be even close to, I'd say it's about 2.5, coming up for 2.5 years. It would be 2.5 years early next year, I think. So let's say 2 for now. And for Korean, I've been learning for about 1.5 years, I would say. And I've always tried to keep up my other languages a bit. I have pen pals in various countries. I do a little bit of reading, watch films and things from the countries where I've studied the language. But I did notice just in the last sort of time, in the sort of COVID times, as it were, that obviously it's affected mail. I've not been getting letters as regularly. Over the past few years, some of the pen pals I had have also dropped off writing. They've started families. They don't have the time anymore. So I realized I wasn't getting the practice that I used to get, and particularly when I moved to Australia, which is 14-ish years ago now. I'm no longer also getting those trips across to Paris for the weekend, to Prague for the weekend. So I'm missing out on those opportunities to practice as well. So in the second half of this year, probably around May, June, I started thinking seriously that as well as working on these new languages, I really ought to practice my older ones more and try and get into more of a regular schedule for doing that, and not just leaving it to chance when I happen to receive a letter from someone, particularly with some of my less frequently used languages, let's say the ones I've studied for the least amount of time as well. So, I mean, French, German, even Italian, I'm still reasonably comfortable with, but I noticed Czech and Danish and majorly Icelandic, I'd really forgotten quite a lot just from no longer being able to use it as regularly. So I set this up, or as I can see from this this book, actually, it was week 22 of the year, whenever that was. Let me glance, that'll tell us. So yeah, that was during end of May going into June, as I thought. And I set up this page initially, which I'll try and show you as best I can through the video. And I missed off Icelandic actually from this list, because when I very first started, I was leaving Icelandic off, but then I did decide to add it in as well. So this one has French, German, Italian, Czech, Danish, and then Japanese and Korean. And it's just a week by week schedule. What am I doing in them each week? And I have writing, reading, listening, speaking, and then a section for sort of grammar, vocab, Japanese, also kanji. And so I just put a little cross if I did study in one or more of those areas for each language each week. I have found that's not really been working for me, this manner of tracking, because it's not really telling me what I've been doing. So that's something, as we come into talking about next year's planning, I'll show you where I've changed how I'm going to keep track of that for next year. But it has at least made me look at certain aspects. Like, I found it's incredibly easy to do listening practice every single week. I can always put on a video of something, listen to music, watch a film, easy peasy. Reading also not too hard to do some. Writing a little bit harder. And one thing I did try when I first started this schedule was I'd seen a few people recommend keeping a daily journal in your target language. So for me, I was alternating between each of my languages, except Icelandic, because I still needed to go back and practice that a bit more. But for the other 7, I was alternating between them, 1 each day. The only issue is my daily schedule is pretty much the same most days. So after I'd done this for a few weeks, I was really bored of it because I was pretty much just writing the same types of sentences every single time. Like I'd change the name of the book I was reading or the TV show I was watching, but essentially I'd have nothing much to say apart from I went to work, I watched this TV show, I read this book. So I've decided that isn't working for me. So I've held off doing it just recently. I've stopped, and I've got a plan for a different approach to that next year, which I will talk about. The other thing I did over the last few months when I made this plan is I decided to revise grammar. So as you can see here, all the ticks, I went through for my older languages, so everything except Japanese and Korean. And I noted sort of some main aspects of grammar: present tense, past tense, using prepositions, declining nouns, things like that. And I just whizzed through over the course of several weeks and just gave myself a quick refresher on each of those in my languages. In most cases, as I was looking at the information or listening to a video about it, I realized it was all still in my mind. So it was really just a very, very quick refresher. But I just wanted to make sure I was roughly up to pace with all of that. And the other thing I did was I went through each of my languages, and you'll see here a fairly full page of notes, and I looked up YouTube channels for mostly for teaching the language, but a few that are just sort of more cultural discussion kind of websites or channels, and also websites and apps for the languages. So I have literally this week just finished, today in fact, I finished the last of it, going through each of these websites, looking at each of these apps, assessing whether they will be of any benefit to me personally with where I am with the different languages. I've taken off the bookmark then for any that I feel are not relevant to me or not suitable for me. I've kept the bookmark for ones that I think I could use on a regular basis and go back to for different activities, whether that's listening or reading. And I did the same thing with the YouTube channels as well. I watched a few videos from each, had a look to see whether I thought they were relevant and useful for me. If they weren't, I unsubscribed again. If they were, I've basically spent the last 3 months going through watching all the old content. And today I finished the very last of the old content from Talk to Me in Korean that I'd wanted to look at. So now for the YouTube channels, and there's about 40 of them spread over all 8 of my languages, where I will now just watch new content as they post it each week. So it's been a bit of a task, and in some ways I've kind of put off doing anything else with the languages in the meantime. So I haven't worried too much about trying to do speaking, writing. I've just concentrated on a bit of listening and reading just to get all these resources straight, ready for planning a schedule for next year. So that's where I'm up to and what I've been doing. For some of my languages, I'm obviously at different levels for all of them. For some of them, I really need to do a lot of sort of high beginner, low intermediate practice still, just getting used to using different grammar forms. For ones like French and German, where I'm reasonably advanced level, it's more about things like idioms, more colloquial expressions, and just elevating the language from shorter sentences into things that are more complex and expressing more complex ideas. So that's pretty much where I've been up to. I mean, with my Japanese and Korean, the Korean, I am now also taking classes through the KCC, the Korean Cultural Centre in Sydney, which is linked to the King Sejong Institute in Korea, where they offer free classes. So I take those. I'm planning to continue that through into next year. And with Korean, I find that really useful because it gives me a chance to speak, and it also gives me a chance to refresh stuff that I've learned for myself. But at the same time, I'm still going on and studying more advanced stuff than the class on my own. in fact, I've got here, I've just been taking notes. So I've just filled up today this book where you can see I'm taking notes from various sources, how to study Korean, talk to me in Korean, and Go Billy Korean. And I've literally got to the last page today. And in fact, I've had to stick in this extra little sheet just to finish off the last bit because I ran out of space. But obviously, this is just me taking notes. I'm not actually been trying to use any of this in any major way yet. So that is going to make up part of my plan for next year. And the same with Japanese. I've taken a ton of grammar notes in a book similar to this, which, like this one, I've nearly filled. But I now need to go back through, revise all those, and actually start practice using them so that anything I've studied, I'm actually recognizing. If I hear it or see it, I do recognize it. But to have the ability to produce it myself, just on the spur of the moment speaking or when I'm writing, that's what I need to work on a lot harder in 2022. So that's kind of where I've been, and how I've been getting back into doing languages again. So a lot of it this year has just been, over the last 6 months, so 5 to 6 months, has been revision, just working out where I am up to, how much I've forgotten, what areas I need to look at harder, and also finding suitable resources for doing that. So my aim really, we've only got a few more weeks of the year. What about 7 weeks, 6, 7 weeks of the year? So what I really want to do during these weeks is just look ahead and plan for how I want to proceed in 2022. To that end, I've already got a few things set up. So I use a bullet journal. However, I don't use a bullet journal in the traditional manner, and that's because I am a major forward planner. To give you a bit of an example of that, I've already bought all my Christmas gifts for this year. They're all wrapped, posted where they need to be posted. The only one I haven't got is the work Secret Santa, which I'm hamstrung on, because I'm waiting on the person who organizes it to set it up. But as soon as they do, I'll be out there buying that gift. So that's the kind of forward planning I do. So I always set up my bullet journal in advance for the entire year, as much as possible. So for instance, this is my one for next year. So you can see I've already set up the weekly spreads for the entire year. And in addition to those, I have trackers. So this will be my tracker, my monthly tracker for January, just tracking general stuff, including sleep and mood and things like that, whether I've exercised. Then I have here now the European language tracker. So this is what I'm going to use for next year. So as you can, I don't know how clearly you'll be able to see this on the camera, but we have reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar, vocab. I've got a color code system for the languages, for the 6 European languages, and I'll just be putting those in depending on which days I'm doing which ones. And then on the next page, I've created this one for Korean and Japanese, so it's come that way a bit. Again, with the same categories, plus also the kanji for the Japanese. In fact, I've got kanji here for Korean as well on this month. I got a bit confused. See, on the future month, I didn't put the kanji one for Japanese, for Korean, sorry. So, yeah, so that's basically how I'm going to track that. And the reason that Korean and Japanese are separate and have their own page is because I'm aiming to do the European languages one day per week, do something on one of the languages. But for Korean and Japanese, as my newer ones that I'm really concentrating on at the moment, I try and study those multiple days per week, which is why they need their own spread. And the other thing that I also did is I grabbed this book. This is from Daiso, my favorite store. We have a very tiny Daiso here in Adelaide, but I buy loads of stuff from there. Most of these notebooks that I'm using for my language studies come from Daiso, as do all the pens I'm using. And this is just a little kind of diary for next year. It's a week to view setup, because what I've noticed this year is a shortcoming. As I mentioned earlier when I showed you my spreads from this year, is that I'm saying, oh, I did some writing practice, but what writing practice did I do? I did some reading, but what reading did I do? Am I sort of always reading the same stuff? Am I varying the sources to get different vocab and things like that? And I'd seen a few people who use this kind of method, and they put in their diary exactly what they studied with. They did 2 chapters of this textbook, and I was thinking of doing something similar. And at first I was going to incorporate it into the bullet journal. But as well as being a major forward planner, I'm also someone who doesn't like leaving things unfinished. And I thought I might decide by February that I'm not enjoying doing this and I want to change it, do it differently, not do it at all, this kind of level of tracking. So I didn't want to then have pages and pages of my bullet journal that would just be blank and unfilled in space, because that would really wind me up. So that's why I thought I'll use a separate book for it. But if I find that I enjoy tracking this way, that I find it helpful, then I will probably in 2023 incorporate it into the bullet journal as well, if I decide I'm going to continue doing that kind of tracking. And the one other thing that I have got in my bullet journal, which is not fully set up yet, but will be soon, is I have a page for each language. As you can see, there's German and French on this spread here. And I've got one for each of the 8 languages, which is labeled resources. So this is where I've been going through these past few months, as I mentioned, checking out all these websites or these YouTube channels. And now that I've decided which ones will be useful, I'm going to pop them onto this resource page. I'll probably have, a box for kind of podcasts or listening opportunities, a box for where I'll be able to do reading, a box for sort of more gamified apps and things like that, so that each time I go to study that language, I can look at these are the options and see what I feel like that day and pick something accordingly. So that is the plan. And the plan is for next year still to continue to do one European language each day, or perhaps it's better to phrase it as each European language at least once a week for at least sort of a short period, 20 to 30 minutes at least, in some way, whether it's listening to a podcast, writing something. And as I mentioned, with regards to the writing, I've decided that doing that daily journal just isn't working because my days are too similar and I'm just using exactly the same vocab day after day, and it became really boring very quickly. So what I want to do next year is just do one bit of writing, or maybe 1 to 2 times a week. I'll write in one of the languages. So if I aimed for 2 a week with 8 languages, I'd do each one once a month when I write something. But I'll try to write something that's a little bit longer. Perhaps I'll talk about a book I'm reading, or a drama I'm watching, or, I'll just pick a topic on something that interests me and talk about it in that language. And I am considering posting that stuff somewhere like Journaly, where I can then get corrections from native speakers as well. So that's the plan. In terms of things like Journaly and that, I use Slowly, which is a pen pal app. Though I've got 1 or 2 regular people, but I've had people where I've started writing to them and we've written for several months, but then suddenly they've stopped using the app. And I've been umming and ahhing whether to look at something like HelloTalk or Tandem, but I've been a bit put off because of the things I've heard about people getting swamped. Like with Slowly, I can turn off so that I'm not searchable. So I can search and find people to write to, but other people can't search for me, because when I didn't have that turned off, I was getting swamped just with what were stupid people, just wanting to send like ridiculous messages like hello and nothing else. And, I was looking for people that were just willing to have a proper pen pal type relationship for language exchange. But I felt I was getting messages from just all sorts of random people that weren't looking for the same thing. And I've heard that that's an issue a little bit on those apps as well, where you just get, if you're searchable, you just get absolutely swamped with 90% of them not really being serious or being more sort of like dating and trying to chat people up and things like that, which has put me off doing that more. But it's something I'll maybe consider still, depending on how easy I find it to find language exchange partners. The one that I probably will look at a bit more seriously next year is Italki, whether that's for a language exchange or for like a sort of more of a paid tutor thing. But I kind of wanted to see exactly what level I was up to this year with each of my languages before I decided which way to go with things like that. Because it's no point if I don't feel I'm ready for being able to have conversations yet, then there's no point in booking conversation practice and things like that. So that is something I'm going to give greater consideration to next year once I get settled into a proper schedule. Even if I only did, a couple of lessons in each language a year just to get that big of speaking practice in, I'll probably look at sort of starting slow and then seeing what's working and what isn't. So that is essentially an overview of what I've been doing over the last sort of 6 months or so and what some of my plans are moving into 2022. I mean, in terms of covering the different aspects of language study, what I'm hoping to do is I do each language once a week. So I'll probably obviously keep up with any videos that are released on those YouTube channels I'm following each week. But I'm also thinking that I dedicate 1 week per month to a different aspect. So I have 4 weeks in the month and I want to cover reading, writing, listening, and speaking. I concentrate on one of those each week, building in a bit of grammar and vocabulary on alternate weeks alongside that. So I did start looking at the gold list method for vocab and I liked it, but after I did a couple of weeks on it, I did a kind of one rotation of the full 4 weeks, but then I didn't start a new one because I was just too preoccupied going through all these websites and YouTube channels. So again, that's something I want to pick up again next year. And that will work out okay because I can have sort of a grammar week and then a vocab week, then a grammar week, then a vocab week. So that is how I plan to approach it. If you have any questions, let me know. Before I go, I'll just talk about the next few months' videos, because what I plan to do for essentially the next 8 videos, which will take us up to about July next year, I think, is to take each of the languages I'm studying in turn, 1 per month, and talk a bit about how I got started in them and what resources I used to study them, what I found helpful, just to give anyone who's thinking about learning them a bit of an idea of how I've got on with them and what I found useful. So I'll be starting off, essentially I'm planning to do them roughly in order I learnt them. I'm just looking ahead to my plan here. Yeah, I'm going to essentially do them in the order I started learning them, which will mean we'll start off next month with German. The only exception will be Icelandic, which I bumped to the end after Japanese and Korean, just because Icelandic is an on again, off again one for me. So that will take us up to July next year. And then for the rest of next year, the remaining 5 months, I've got a couple of other topics to talk about. And so I am planning to continue this series right through until the end of 2022. So I hope you'll join me all again next month when I'll be talking about my experience learning German so far. But I will end there for now, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon for another vlog. Of course, I will be back at the end of this month with my book and film wrap-ups as well. Bye for now, everyone.